to Australia.
Did you actually have to escape?
Well, it was kind of apartheid. I grew up in apartheid South Africa, which I was not happy with, and I knew I couldn't have stayed. So at 22, my family decided that, well, instead of me just going, we come as a group, and so we went to Australia. So I've been an Aussie now for 35 years.
Wow.
But I live in LA. For the last 10 years, I've been in America. And
do you go back and forth a lot, or
we visit home. At least once a year, right?
Okay, that's
good. And because we've got family there, and we'll go back eventually.
Right.
But we thought we came to LA thinking it was going to be 5 years. And, and it's actually now been 10.
So tell me why. What you were planning on going there for 5 years to do what?
Yeah. Okay. So we felt called. I mean, if that's the bottom line of it.
Right.
We felt very strong obligation to drop everything we were doing, sell up whatever we got, we cashed up whatever we had. It wasn't much.
Right.
And we decided we'll go, and if worst case scenario, we'll just kind of come back.
Go back, right.
And go on the dole. and we ended up staying, and it just my own work is being a writer, kind of a thinker, speaker. We do training of leadership organizations, helping church plant. Go to scale, innovate, entrepreneurship, and all that stuff. So it suits America and it suits me. So it's been great experience.
That's incredible. And so you've stayed there because everything has blossomed, really, with the ministry and what you're doing?
It's a surprising thing is, how does this Jewish kid, this drug addict from South Africa end up in the American States? Yeah, so that's a bit of a story there. But no, it's amazing what God will do if you just follow.
Right. So you were talking about developing leaders and developing organizations. What made you want to do that? Did you look at some of the organizations and just look at it and think this needs some strategy or this needs some development? How did that come about to you?
Well, it's a bit of both of being involved as a local leader, local minister in an inner city church. And we all come from the freakazoid edges of town. So I came, like I said, I had a kind of drug background. My wife was living as a lesbian. She came to the Lord on acid.
Really?
Completely converted.
Wow.
And there was a whole kind of group of freaks that kind of came to the Lord at the same time. And so we ended up as being kind of their pastors, and it became a church.
Oh my
and then we began to we had a heart for people on the edges of town. That's where we came from, right? And so we began to reach out, do church planting and mission work, among the poor and the marginalized, but also the oddballs and the weirdos and anyone we could find. We collected them.
That's such a very specific, unique ministry.
It was
Which
weird,
is amazing,
but
because people need to connect with other people who understand them.
Yeah.
So that's incredible.
We still like that.
Yeah.
So we go to Burning Man every year, which is our freak collection. I don't know if you know what Burning Man is, but it's about
some people do. Yes, I have heard of it.
So that's awesome.
That's amazing. So tell me a little bit, we have a little bit more time, so tell me a little bit about how you came out of being a drug addict.
Well, the answer is Jesus, of course, isn't it? But actually, so I was in the military in South Africa, and I didn't want to be particularly, so in order to help myself kind of cope with it, I did a lot of dope, right? And the guy was the leader.
There's a lot of pressure, and there's a lot of, it's hard. There's trauma that comes along with it, so I understand.
And particularly, again, in apartheid South Africa, it's not something I felt particularly, I was at odds with it anyway. So the thing is that for me to actually cope with the military, thankfully I was in the medical corps, so I didn't have to shoot anyone. Well, that was infantry. That does help, right?
That's helpful.
That's helpful.
Right. You're helping people get better,
Anyway, so we in our little drug circle, we had a guy called Murray who he had an encounter with Jesus one weekend, a huge encounter with the Holy Spirit, comes back, doesn't leave us, something had changed in his life, and he was always a bit of the lead of the group anyway. And he began to introduce Jesus into our lives, and I've always felt that I'd have something to do with Jesus anyway, so it kind of connected, and then the journey goes. It took 2 years for me to really convert, I guess is the word. Yeah.
So when your time encountering Jesus, tell me how that transition in your heart went from living a certain lifestyle to then really not just encountering Jesus, but then following after him, and then now living your life serving him.
Well, okay, this is where it gets, again, unusual. I think unusual. I try to find someone, because I knew enough about Jesus. I dodged him for a long time. And then, so I was in Melbourne now as a young person in a new city, in a new country,
Right.
And I eventually found a person working. I was working at an electronics store at the time. Couldn't get a job. It was a high on the unemployment. And I found out this guy who was a Christian. Everyone wanted to clear out of his store. I said, send me there.
Wow.
Anyway, he was a Pentecostal dude. Takes me to meet his pastor, and I was living with someone at the time, so we both go along there that night.
Huh.
And man, these crazies prayed for us, and I mean, I met God. I mean, I just completely turned around.
Right.
And I met the Eternal One, and I can't describe what happened to me even now, 30-something years later.
Wow.
So a huge turnaround, a huge encounter with God.
Wow.
Turned me.
Yeah, that's amazing. And so, were your family believers?
No.
They weren't. Okay,
So I
so
was the first believer in the family.
you were the first believer, and then your brother also is in full-time
Yes,
ministry.
he did. So
Lawrence.
I had the privilege of leading Lawrence to the Lord. And
Really? Can you tell us that story?
Well, that, I mean, it just followed quite naturally on him. I mean, he looking at me, something had changed in my life, and he knew that.
Yeah.
So he was just observing. And the odd thing about Lawrence and Louise, Lawrence became a believer one weekend because I led him to the Lord, and then he was like worried now, what do I tell Louise, right? Because they were sweethearts. They'd known each other from 16. They'd never had anyone else. It was just like perfect, right?
Right.
And now he's worried about her. So the odd thing is that she was led to the Lord the same weekend. And so they phoned each other and said, funny thing.
This. Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, so
it's
that
an
was
incredible
another,
story.
it's an amazing story.
Right.
And then, of course, he's gone on to do ministry among Jewish people and, so all the Messianic work. And my calling has been broadly to the nations and to the broader church. So,
right.
Yeah.
And so if your family aren't believers, how did it feel to be the first believer in your family? What was that like? I mean, then you get to lead your brother to the Lord. But then with the rest of your family, how was that for you?
Yeah, well, it was not easy.
Right.
And I had to come to the point where I thought, well, if they do chuck me out, which I didn't think they were not that particularly religious Jews, but the Jewish culture and identity was strong.
Right.
They came from Johannesburg, which is a very strong Jewish culture.
Yeah.
And so I thought, well, this could go badly, but I couldn't turn my back on what I had experienced.
Right.
So I thought, well, they weren't happy with me.
Right.
And then when I led Lawrence to the Lord, not happy at all. But I think in the end, both my parents actually were quite proud of us in the end. I think we've lived a better life having done that.
Right. My father is the same. So he grew up Jewish, and he was the first believer in his family. And it's, it was hard, that moment of thinking, okay, I'm gonna have to communicate that, gonna tell them, and you want to be able to express what the Lord just did, but it's a hard conversation.
Yeah. And non-Jewish people might not know this, but I mean, like in a very religious family, they're likely to have a seder for you, which is that they bury you.
Right.
So then you are dead to the family.
Right.
And I thought, well, that could happen. I didn't think it would, but it could have.
Right.
And so you have to kind of live with that. Well,
right.
If that happens, I have to live with that, right?
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's got to be challenging. Yeah. And so, but now you said they're proud of you, and so you guys have a good relationship with the rest of your family.
They've passed on now, so both my parents are gone.
Sorry about that.
But yes, I think they came to a point where they were sneakingly proud, and my mother, began to kind of confess her love for Messiah about 6 months before. Yeah, she passed on, so she died of cancer. So
oh gosh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that happens.
Right. Well, that's amazing.
Dad, not so much. Dad, not so much. Kind of he was never someone who loved God in any way. But
right. Right. Well, and so tell me a little bit more. You then went from leading your brother to the Lord, and then when did you feel like you were called to be a writer and be a speaker? And, there's that shift in that journey of, okay, I'm actually going to implement what I believe and what I'm doing and spread it to the world. What was that like?
Yeah, well, that was interesting. I promised the Lord that I wouldn't write anything unless I would add value to what we already knew. So there's a lot of books that come out that are just, we should have learned along the way in Sunday school. So I just decided I wouldn't do that. But we were experimenting in the inner city, and God had given us favor, and there were things happening. So there was a story evolving. I was then hired by my denomination to effectively lead the engine room of the denomination and the strategic kind of center. So
that's fitting if you're developing organizations.
It's true, although for me it was very difficult because I wasn't, I really liked the grassroots. I enjoyed what we were doing. We were church planting and extending, into unreached people groups in our city.
Right.
And then I thought I was paying for my sins at that point, which were many of them. and ended up in denominational work. But I still stayed in the local setting. And I think the combination of being local and in a regional gave me a perspective that I think was unique.
Right.
And I began to articulate, and I think God has wired me as a thinker. I'm intrigued by ideas and how they play out. I was enough of a rebel not to follow the kind of status quo, so I've always had an alternative.
Right.
And
You think outside of the box.
That became valuable.
That's great. Right.
I think that's really what the value contribution I give is just think outside the box.
Right. And so tell me a little bit, where did you meet your wife?
At a New Year's Eve party. It was her first and mine as a Christian.
That's
it was
incredible.
weird, man, because, they played Spin the Bottle, but we had to guess a Bible verse. I mean, this is on New Year's Eve, and came from...
That's new. I haven't heard of that one
weird.
before.
And then, so we met, and it was, we became instant friends.
Yeah.
She felt that we would marry that night. I had to come to grips with that, but... even the guy she was going
You had
out
to come to grips with that?
Well, I attended, I had a pretty radical conversion, right? And women had played a role in my life at that point, which, maybe it wasn't that good for me.
Right.
Just leave it there. And then, so I decided I would be celibate, so I had to kind of grapple with that. But we became instant friends, and even the boyfriend she was going out with at the time, he said to her that night, "You'll marry that man." He just knew, right? Too.
Wow.
So another kind of touch of God at the time,
right.
And leading. So we all went to seminary together, and we eventually got married about 4 years later.
Oh my goodness, that's amazing.
So we're married now 28 years.
28 years.
Yeah, 28
wow.
years. It's
that's
awesome.
That's amazing.
And other than Jesus, the most redemptive thing that's happened to me. My dear Deborah, she's an amazing woman.
Yes, that's what I love. I mean, I'm a newlywed. So Michael and I just got married last summer, and I just feel like marriage has been so healing for me.
You're saying that.
It's been incredible.
Yeah.
So, anyways,
for me, it has been too. It's been an awesome experience.
Right. No, that's great. So tell me, your wife, is she here with you today?
Yes.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yes.
And you guys have traveled together to Israel many times, right?
No, actually, no. This is my fourth time, but the last time we were here was 18 years ago.
Wow.
Shame on me.
Oh, no. But now you're here.
We're here.
How does it feel to be back?
Been great. It's been really awesome. And it feels like, when I first came to the city, I was just out of the army, and I know like Israelis go on
right, they travel the world, right.
So I did that too, but I came from South Africa.
Right.
First came here, worked on the kibbutz, but when I first set eyes on Jerusalem, I said, this city has important significance for me. And so I knew I'd have something to do with it, and again, I have that experience again, while I'm here.
That's amazing.
It's home for a Jew, right?
Yeah, it is. It really is.
It is.
And the Lord just draws your heart back here.
Yes.
And that's something. It's really something. It talks about that in Scripture. How God is the one who is going to draw your heart back to Israel. And so, I mean, I see that happening all over. It happened in my life. It happened in my husband's life. It's it's happening. Even for those who don't live here, it's still something that just gets a hold of you.
Yeah. So it's a place where history and destiny intersect, right?
Right.
You can't dodge it. It is the most significant history that has happened here has changed the world and will continue to do so.
Right. And so you do travel around the world, right?
I do.
So what is your outside of Israel, because we've done a lot about Israel, but just for you personally, what's your favorite place outside of Israel?
That's an interesting question. I enjoy visiting Europe, and there's a whole lot of reasons for that.
Yeah.
But if I had to pick my favorite city, I'd go between Prague is pretty gorgeous.
Prague is really gorgeous. Yes.
And then I do love Lisbon and Edinburgh.
Okay.
Yeah, different.
We haven't been to
cities,
those places yet, but
Lisbon's
we'll have to put it on our list.
But I do enjoy Europe a lot. And then, of course, I like San Francisco. I like all the naughty cities.
You do?
Partly because those are my people, right?
Right.
I understand them, and we have a commitment to somehow engage them and bring Jesus to that, people who are far from God and far from the church. So we love that. We love Austin. We love New York City.
Yeah.
Seattle.
Right. No, those are great cities. We have great friends in all those cities. I'm not really a city person, though, so I've had to adjust a little bit to Jerusalem, but it's growing on me. Yeah. It really is. Yeah. So you're going to be speaking tonight. We get the privilege of hearing from Alan Hirsch tonight. So just give us a little snippet about what you're going to be sharing about.
Okay. Well, I think this is, I think the most significant thing that we can do at any given time is to touch base with the founder and to kind of check out whether we actually square with what he stands for, with his life and his teachings, where the church veers away from the teachings of Yeshua, Jesus, we end up in something other than what was intended in the first place. And I would say the great recalibration or the reboot of the church is always to go back to Dr. Jesus for the checkup. Yeah. And I think that in this critical time in history, that's possibly the most significant thing we can do.
Right. Yeah. No, it is. It's so important. So you speak all over the world, right? Mm-hmm. And you're here today. So are you excited to preach from Jerusalem?
Yeah, I am. I mean, why not?
Have you ever preached from Jerusalem before? This is your first time.
My first time in ministry.
Wow,
now, right?
That is incredible.
That is incredible, and you realize actually, this is again the most significant city probably in the world.
Right.
At least, as far as religion,
yeah,
in the right sense of the
right.
term, so, yeah,
exactly.
Very significant.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us in the live host. Y'all, you are going to hear from Alan Hirsch, his first time preaching straight from Jerusalem. Stay tuned, and we're now going to go and hear from Hillsong London. So stay tuned, stay with us, and we're so happy that you're here.
Go Hillsong.